This is the lecture portion after reading the chapter on 1 Megaton Bomb. The homework assignment for today is to complete the Communist Manifesto based on the row that you are sitting in, capitalists versus communists. At this class, you will also have to be aware of the class ranking if you are on the capitalist side. We should already have an understanding of these terms. The one that we probably haven't spent too much time going over is this one here, indirect versus direct fighting. Remember, if the US and Russia go to war, that would be direct fighting. So what they are doing is they are fighting in any nation. When you see this box, it represents any nation, and it could mean any nation. If the United States starts to invest in this country by giving weapons and training, and Russia does not, then that means that this increases the likelihood of any nation falling to the US side. Keep in mind, when we are talking about the Soviet Union or Russia, there is a difference. Russia is the country, whereas the Soviet Union represents Russia and all of the areas under the sphere of influence controlled by Russia during the Cold War. We played this game in class where you were asked to roll and see how many countries you could influence to your side. One way to determine a Cold War winner would be to simply count up the capitalists versus the communists. Keep in mind that we have a point A, which is a reference to the Iron Curtain speech. That is at the German section that is controlled by Russia, primarily this section here. A portion of this class is going to be to understand the impact of nuclear weapons and mutually assured destruction. We have already played this game where you start off with 100 health points and you roll, and every space you land on is either going to ask you to add or subtract health points. However, you do have to stop here, and when you stop here, you lose a significant amount of health, and the end result usually is that everybody playing the game simply does not make it. The U.S. nuclear monopoly and the Baruch Plan. This is coming out of World War II, where the United States has the nuclear monopoly. What you're looking at the bottom is a map. Just went into Google, typed in nuclear proliferation map. You'll probably find similar maps if you did a comparable search. And you'll find that there are numerous countries that have nuclear weapons, but they possibly are not allowed to have nuclear weapons according to treaties. Since after World War II, the United States has that nuclear monopoly, being the only country with nuclear weapons. This does lead to a nuclear arms race where Russia was also trying to obtain weapons. So the Baruch Plan was proposed as a way to try to keep nuclear weapons out of any nation's hands. The only problem was the United States at that point did have nuclear weapons. So to convince nations to sign the Baruch Plan would basically mean that for a short span of time, the United States would have nuclear weapons, and once the US was able to determine that every other nation did not have nuclear weapons, then the US was going to destroy its nuclear weapons, again, to keep nukes out of mankind. What this map here is showing you, again, is the amount of nuclear weapons that are in possession according to this particular map. And you'll notice that there are certain countries that probably have nuclear weapons. However, according to certain treaties, they are not allowed to have them. The nuclear monopoly is broken when the Soviet Union in 1949 detonates Joe 1, signifying that Russia now has the nuclear bomb. This leads to a series of panic in the United States, where the United States starts to test its nuclear weapons to make bigger and better bombs, leading to panic in the United States domestically, where Americans start to build bomb shelters as they panic, fearing nuclear annihilation. The fear of nuclear annihilation is going to exist in the 50s, the 1960s, but by the time you get to the 70s, as a result of this mutually assured destruction, detente, which represents a cool down period, represented a 1970 strategy where both sides were trying to engage in diplomacy. An example would be the SALT I and SALT II treaty, which would be an example of detente. This slide is a reference to the homework reading 1 Megaton Bomb. gave you a pretty good indication of what would happen if a nuclear bomb went off. On the test, you are responsible for knowing what happens inside of those rings. And what I want you to think about, inside A, everything is going to be flattened, like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At point B, which is actually this line right here, talked about humans disappearing, and point C is this section right here, and D is going to be dependent on wind conditions. If you were to click this link, it would take you to a world map where you can type in a nuclear bomb and you can detonate it over a city, and it'll give you similar rings showing you the devastation. Now, if all of this sounds crazy and you're trying to figure out how to win a nuclear war, it could come down to who launches first. Let's look at this particular scenario where the United States launches its nuclear weapons. Let's pretend that at the yellow line, that is when nuclear missiles incoming for Russia can be detected by Russian radar. That would mean that Russia would then launch its nuclear weapons. The problem is, by the time Russian nukes reach here, US nukes have reached Russia. Of course, Russian nukes are now on their way, but as Russian nukes are on their way, Russia is already destroyed because the United States has struck first. The absurdity of the Cold War would argue that this line right here, this time period where the United States lived and Russia was destroyed, that would mean that the US won the Cold War. It's as dumb as that. Here you have an image of nuclear devastation. In this chart, you can determine a Cold War winner. The more absurd, the better. You can see the United States, the amount of nukes launched, Soviet Union launched, and the amount of people dead. Let's assume everybody is killed, all of the cities are destroyed, all the animals, all of the land is destroyed. However, we have one ferret on the US side, then the winner would be the United States. Hooray, hooray, you win. This map is showing one 100 megaton nuclear bomb, which was made by Russia, the Tsar bomb, and the amount of devastation that one bomb could inflict. So by positioning 4 and detonating them here, we can see a substantial part of the US destroyed. If you're wondering where the United States was able to obtain this information, there was a nuclear testing facility, Los Alamos, and the United States would set up these fake towns to detonate a nuclear bomb to determine what the implication would be on actual structures. This is a photograph representing a nuclear bomb going off in close proximity to Las Vegas. And occasionally, present day, you will come across nuclear testing, mainly with North Korea, because as a result of treaties, detonating nuclear bombs above ground have been signed to prevent that from taking place. But North Korea does not follow any of those treaties and is one of those nations who should not have nuclear weapons, according to those treaties, does test nuclear weapons, and occasionally there will be a story where a certain amount of radiation has been detected, and then North Korea usually lies. Some more issues for the Cold War. You want to treat these like definition. I've already mentioned the Iron Curtain speech. That is the imaginary border which separates the capitalists from the communists. The United States and Russia have had tension since 1917, when that Russian Revolution first took place. And during World War II, Russia perceived numerous events as unfair, like the development of the nuclear bomb without Russian consent, letting 1 million soldiers die at Stalingrad, and trying to free France as opposed to trying to help Russia on the Russian front as they fought against the Germans. And they also fought over Germany because, remember, Germany is divided into 4 sections, as was the German capital. That Iron Curtain actually is here. So that Iron Curtain is oddly part of Germany. But remember, within Germany, the capital, you still have a little capitalist section. That would be Berlin. That's what this image here represents. Germany right after World War II. And this section is all Russia's. as would be this section of Berlin. And eventually, during the Cold War, the Allies would unite their sections, creating a East and West Germany, as well as a East and West Berlin. So this right here represents the Russian section. This is part of that Iron Curtain, dividing the capitalists from the communists. But keep in mind that Berlin is physically located, the capital of Germany, in that Iron Curtain. We're now going to look at some links. I picked this link here because it is a link that shows you that nuclear testing facility, some of those fake towns, and a lot of the footage that Hollywood tried to recreate is actually military footage when they would detonate and test nuclear weapons. The Hills Have Eyes trailer, which is a horror film. You only need to watch about 30-40 seconds where it'll go over premise behind the film. Human beings have been mutated and have become cannibals as a result of nuclear testing. And then these two clips here, which is about war games. I'm not going to say much until the next slide after you watch those scenes. Now for the scenarios, what you're going to do is pick a partner, and one of you will be the US, the other will be Russia. And going back to the war games scenario, what was going on in that war games clip was the United States has soldiers in nuclear missile silos. And there were two in that clip, and they were given an order from DC, and DC in this exercise was instructing them to launch their nukes. In that scene, one of the individuals did not want to do that, and then the other individual was trying to force him. This was an exercise. I don't remember the percentages, but let's just say in this scenario where it was a real live exercise, Russia had launched its nukes, and these individuals were in that shelter, and 40% of our nukes did not get out of the ground in an actual nuclear war, then that would mean that the United States did not use 40% of its nuclear arsenal, which increases the likelihood that Russia survives. The United States cannot have this, so what they were trying to do was use a computer system. So if the president gave the order, it would go directly to the computer, and the computer would launch the nukes. What you have to do in this scenario, this exercise, is figure out how many hours, days, and people would you have in the silos with your partner. Now, if your partner says that they're going to have people in the missile silos for 23 hours and you go 24, you win, they lose. If they are going to give off, let's say, for holidays, that would mean that if they are only in the missile silos for 360 days and you are 365, then that means you have 5 days where they are not in the missile silo. At that point, I would launch my nuclear weapons. So that's what this slide here is trying to get you to. Going back to the war game film clip, they were talking about procedures. I don't remember the specific procedures. I know that they needed to, let's say, get the key, then they needed to put the key into the slot, then the one person had to turn their key in sequence, and then, I don't know, let's say down here it's launching the button, and there's a step in between. This is asking you to figure out what step is the point of no return. If your point of no return is step 4, then that would mean once you give the order to the people in your missile silo, once they finish 1, 2, 3, if they get the 4th step, at that point, nothing matters. They have to go all the way through. Now, why does this matter? Let's just pretend in the United States there are 100 nuclear missile bases. You would not know if this part of the world or the country is already destroyed. So if you're over here and there's no communication, you need to just launch those nukes. The problem is, for these training exercises, what do you do if for some reason the training exercise goes beyond that step and the people in the missile silo have accidentally launched? In this scenario, what is your no return step is what you're trying to argue. These scenarios were outlined in the film War Games. The president gives the order. These guys in the missile silo, mainly I believe it was this guy, did not want to launch the nukes, so they are going to bypass the human element by using a computer. With your partner, Determine what type of nuclear bomb would you develop. The maximum size is 100. How much would you put for that particular budget? You can devote 1 million for every 1 megaton bomb you make. So if you're going to put 60 million, that means you have 40 million saved. I don't know what you would use it for, but 60 million and you would be able to make a 60 megaton bomb. What about your partner? What are they going to make? Or your adversary is actually not your partner. Now this is the problem if you're going to put the bomb, let's say you're making a 60 megaton bomb, then that means you have 40 million for healthcare, which means you care more about nuclear weapons than the safety of your citizens. Whoever lost in that previous scenario, in other words, the individual who won the nuclear megaton, now let's just say we have two people, and this person says they're making a 60 megaton bomb and they're making a 40 megaton bomb. Well, then that means that this side wins the nuclear arms race, but they didn't put too much in healthcare. Have them roll, and if they roll a 1 and 2, then their people all survive. If they roll a 3 or 4, then we'll say 30 to 40% of their population dies because of health problems. And if they roll a 5 or 6, then we could say 50 to 60% of their population gets sick as a result of limited access to healthcare. Have them roll again, and then figure out who wins. So ultimately, what's being asked here is for you to determine, where this money is going. Does it make sense to put it into nuclear armaments in comparison to safety for your citizens? In this scenario, this is an actual thing. The Leo Puella lead suit. You have $100 million with your partner. Figure out how much would you put to health? How much would you buy this suit to protect them from nuclear bombs? And then how many nuclear bombs would you make? And you want to do the same thing. You can make more nuclear bombs, or you could put money in health, or you could buy this nuclear protective suit for your citizens. Whoever wins that, and win would be the person who has the better military, but that would come at the expense of health, then have them roll. Whoever has less money in health, they would have to roll, try to figure out the same situation here. The last thing we're going to do is watch the day after. You're going to click this link here, and you only need to watch certain sections, 39 to 44, 56 minutes to 1 hour and 2 minutes, so what, that's like 6 minutes. Keep in mind when you look at some of the footage here, it's actually real military footage, and I want you to watch the ending as well. 1 hour 58 to the ending. There is a public service announcement at the end, and then this is the closure question.